2009 Volkswagen TDI Jetta. Changing this transmission filter. I opted to fill it from the top. The filter house, where the filter goes on at, that's where I'm filling the transmission fluid. That's one way to do it. You could also fill it from the bottom. But rather than go and take the plug and figure out what size fitting I need and all that, I found out I could just fill it from here at the top. So that's the way I decided to go. It takes a little bit longer from what I understand, but I don't have to spend any extra money to do it. So I'm getting ready to, I'm putting it back together. I've already put the plug back in the bottom, both of them. There's one that is actually 5/16 fitted. I'm not sure if it's actually a 5/16 or not, but the 5/16 Allen head fitted. And then for the main plug, the big plug that goes on the outside with the washer on it, is a 14 millimeter. So I did those, pulled out the one, and once I pulled out the 14 millimeter plug, I probably got about 3 quarts of oil out before I pulled out the straw that is the 5/16. So I decided I would call several dealerships. So I called 3 different dealerships and found out how much fluid I was supposed to put back in there. And they all told me, well, 2 of them told me 5 quarts. One of them told me 7.5 quarts. And so I went with the one that said 5 quarts because when I ordered the kit for this car and put all my information in, they sent me 5 quarts. So I decided I'm putting 5 quarts in it. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm on the number 5th quart right now, or liter. And I've never seen any oil like this. It just says gear oil. But it's in foreign, it's a 1 liter bottle, and it takes 5 liters. And it's in a bunch of different languages that I am not familiar with. Made in Germany, so I'm believing that this is the stuff that this car calls for. And I'm putting it in, and it's about the same consistency as the stuff that came out. Just a whole lot lighter in color. So I'm putting it back together, and I'll walk you through the process of putting it back together, since I didn't walk you through taking it apart. So filling it up. Okay, so for the actual filter housing is a 24 millimeter right here. So we tighten that down, just don't go crazy. And then after we fill it up, put the filter in, push it down, then put the filter housing on. Now we're going to do the battery box, battery tray. For the battery tray, we have 3 10 millimeter socket nuts, bolts, 3 10 millimeter bolts that hold the battery tray in place. Okay. And when I took this off, I had this cable right here that ran across the front of the battery tray, and I found it easier. I found it a bit easier to remove this, since I already had the battery out anyway. I just removed this cable from its spot here to make it easier for me to get the battery tray out. So make sure you put that back if you remove it, and then the other one just moves out the way so that you can get to it just like that. Actually, I'm gonna put this one behind. I'm gonna put the red one behind the black one because it looks better. And now we're going to put the air box back in. Okay, so we have this hose here that needs to be hooked up. hold on. Look at that hose there. And then there's another hose that's down here. It's just a vent or to let the water out. If you get water in there, it's right down there. Just tucked down behind the headlight. And then we have a 5mm Allen screw. Oh, wrong. That's not it. Where is it at? Oh, here it is. 5mm screw that sits right here that holds the battery box in place. Okay, so we get that, and then I'll show you some more. Okay, and then got that in, got that bolted down, and then we got this little filter thing that goes in. It only goes in one way. Sits on top of your air box. Oh, and then we have this. And when it comes off, you see this right here? Little button. There's one there. And there's one there. So I took it off because it made it a little bit easier for me. But it just hooks, it just goes right into there. And when you push it in, and it'll click. And then also, we have this little bugger here. And it sits here, and it has 2 screws. One here, one right here. There's one, and there's the other one. And those screws go right into those. I took it off just because when I was doing it, it just made it easier to get all of this out by taking this out. Taking this out just made it easier to get the whole rest of the air box out. So I did it. Okay, I'm putting it, you might not do it. It's your choice. It's up to you. It's your car. But I chose to do it. Okay, so, and then this actually sits into there. I'll show you in just a second. I'm gonna bolt this back on and I'll show you. Those 2 screws are a T20 Torx for those 2 to hold this on. T20 Torx. So now we're gonna put this back on. And it just the hose goes in there. Okay, so that goes on there like that. And if you feel down here, you'll feel that tab, that it's in place in that little square there. And the same on the other side. It's a little bit harder to feel the other side, but if you can do it, you can do it. And then we have this little cover here, and it has a tab here and a tab here, and it just goes right down on there. And there's a ring that goes, see that ring there? Sits on that groove there. See? Just like that. Once you get it right, you got it. Okay? But now, we can put the air filter in and put the air filter box back together. I didn't take the air filter, I didn't take all this off. I just took it and put it up here like this out the way. There was no need to disconnect all this, the mass airflow sensor and all this from there. It was enough space to where I could just move it out the way. And so that's what I did. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and change my air filter while I got it out, since I have a new one. Put a new air filter in, and I'm going to put the air box back on. Okay, so got the air box back together. Those are Phillips screws that hold that in place. And then I got the fuse box cover that I'm putting back on now. And these just slide, put it on and it slides forward and it locks it in place. And when you take it off, you just slide it back and it'll allow you to lift it up. Bam, Bam, just like that. And when you slide it forward, it actually pulls it down a little bit, keep water out of there. And now I'm ready to put the battery back in. So that's what we do now. Okay, battery's back in. And we are ready to start it up. Double check and make sure that you connected anything that you may have disconnected. Like if you ended up taking the mass airflow sensor plug off, double check and make sure that you got everything plugged in before you attempt to start the car. The cables all hooked up and everything, because if you have anything disconnected and you start the car, you're going to have a code. It's going to throw a trouble code, and you have to deal with that. So if you didn't have any before, you don't want to have any after. So make sure you double check and make sure that you hooked up everything that you disconnected. All right, and we can go ahead and start the car now. Okay, so there's my engine temperature. It's supposed to be a certain degree temperature when you do this, but it's supposed to be rather on the cold side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and, with the car still running, jacked up, I got it sitting pretty level. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go down and I'm going to open up with the 14 millimeter the transmission and let out any excess fluid. Now that the temperature is starting to climb, but it's not all the way to full operating temperature, but it's warmed up a little bit, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So then my level should be where it's supposed to be. Because when I did it earlier, when I drained it, it was about 2.5, 3 quarts over. Because when I drained it, I filled up, I had a 5 gallon, a 1 gallon plus 1, 5 quart, blah. I had a 5 quart jug, and it was right about halfway. Well, actually a little more than halfway. It was about 3.5 quarts that I pulled out before I pulled out the straw. So hopefully it works a lot better with the proper amount of fluid in it than it did with way too much fluid in it. And it's not, and hopefully this hasn't tore up the transmission. This is the first time that I've done this since I bought this car. So I just pray to God that it's good. Okay, so with the clean bottle that I used that the fluid came in, and a funnel, I'm gonna pull this drain plug out. Pulling the drain plug. Car's still running. And I let the excess fluid out. Wow, that's more than I thought was gonna come out of there. And I let that, the plug fall into the funnel, and it'll be easy to get out. And then once it stops, I'll put the plug back in, tighten it up, and that should be right where it needs to be. And that's how much came out. About 400 milliliters came back out. So I don't know, maybe next time I'll leave 400 milliliters in the bottle, and when I pull the plug, it'll be right where it needs to be, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know if I actually have the temperature right or not, but I'm gonna put my skid plate back on and take it for a drive and see how it does. See if it performs any better than it did before when I had too much fluid in it. So now put the skid plate back on and try it out. Woohoo! Yep, got the skid plate back on, got the jack stands out, and set it back on the ground, and we are ready for a test run. See how much better this thing feels. Well, I need to take it and get it hot because what would happen is I would drive it and it would shift fine in the beginning, but once it got hot, it would start jerking on occasion. Not all, it wasn't very consistent, but sometimes it would just jerk. Let off the brake, wait for the transmission to engage, and then go to take off, and it would jerk real hard. But hopefully, with the right amount of fluid now, that is resolved. So this is how much fluid I pulled out of the transmission on this 09 TDI Jetta. Look at the lines. Right? So that's almost 8 quarts. That's pretty much 8 quarts of transmission oil fluid that was in this car. And it's only supposed to be 4 and a portion. I think it's like 4.4 or 4.6, something like that. That's supposed to be in there. And I pulled out 8. So it's pretty much double what it should have been. Wow. And the car still drove fine. It just that it would shift hard when I take off. Other than that, it ran fine. We're gonna see how it is now.